like they're overly on anything. Oh God! Oh, that right there is why I yo-yo the headbanger rocker head, baby. Look at that. Freaking choked it. That yo-yo and that rocker head is like no other bottom bait. It makes them lose their marbles. I don't know if it looks like a wounded crawdad or what it is, but that technique is deadly. God. All right, guys, so that clip you just watched, this is a segment that I'm starting. This is the very first one, and it's called Beyond the Catch. And a lot of the time you see clips of guys catching big fish, or I show you a 30-minute long episode, and there's one, maybe a couple of big catches throughout the film, and I loosely talk about it over 30-minute period, but a lot of the time it's that first big catch that gives you that real clue that you can build upon. So you often hear me talking about the puzzle pieces of bass fishing, and this is everything you know, and getting clues and starting to be able to assemble that puzzle with all the knowledge pieces you have to where you can see the bigger picture. And what I mean by this, you could be going throughout a day, you could be throwing a bait, you know what to do with the double buzz, you know what to do with a glide, you know what to do with a jig, and you know all these lures, and you watched all these 5-minute segments online, and you're like, I know how to do this, I know how to do that, I know how to do this. Well, how come I'm not KVD? How come I'm not Jacob Wheeler already? And the reality is it's a lot more complex than that, and they're great thinkers. This is a thinking man's game. This is not a athlete's game. I used to be a lot fitter, but now I got this dad bod going. But it's a thinking man's game, so that works out for all of us. And I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you right here, a lot of the time I leave the water and I remember these things and I'm just like, oh man, I should have done that. And this is how it works in competitive bass fishing. They have these pre-fishing days, the days before the tournament starts, to figure out these clues, to dial this in, to sit there and think about it and, you know, formulate a better idea of how they're going to attack it. So I'm going to play the video one more time, and I'll take away the music. I'll work it down slower for you guys, and I want you to try to pick apart and get some clues here. Think about the cover. The time of year is spring. It's around spawn. It's around post-spawn, spawn/post-spawn, and there's a shad spawn going on. So I'm going to play this video and come right back again, and you tell me what you noticed from this video, and then I'm going to break it down for you. Doesn't seem like they're overly on anything in the middle of it. But we see them randomly run up and chase bait. When that's happening, you get that in the middle of them, you'll get the bigger one. That seems to be the deal for bait. Running up to our motor, look at that. It ran straight up to the trolling motor. That's weird. Line drive right forward. You didn't reel it up. There's the fish. Oh, God! Oh, that right there. Okay, so now you watched it and you have some ideas here. I already told you it's spring, it's during the spawn/post-spawn/shad spawn.
Shad spawn is just when the water starts to warm during the post spawn, typically for bass fishing if your lake has threadfin shad. I don't know about the other shad species. I'm referring to threadfin shad as I talk about this right here. Now, first things first, where is my location on this lake? I went to the back of a creek. Shad like to spawn in the back of the creeks. One thing you're going to notice is the wind is blowing into this creek that I'm fishing. So you'll see the wind going across the point, leading farther back. That means bait is being pushed into this particular creek. I also know shad like to spawn in here. My initial move was looking for shad spawn, and I would see some bait balls get busted up on the surface here and there, but they were dropping water level on this lake. This is New Maloney's Reservoir. They've dropped it by about a foot a day. My buddy Josh Paris mentioned that to me. As I was coming there a couple of days prior, there was a good shallow largemouth bite. I'm talking from a foot of water to 8 foot of water from everything I was hearing, but then they started to drop water. So the clue is there, when they start dropping water, fish that are structure and cover oriented, when that water drops, they have to pull out to the nearest deeper spot to that. So naturally that shallow bite is most likely going to go away unless it's floating structure or cover. And I'll break that down in another video that I think you guys will really like to hear. So the spot I'm fishing is near the back of a creek channel, but it is a pinch point. A pinch point means the back of a creek channel, the bass could be spawning there. The shad could go there to spawn as well. The shad do it in open water, just where it goes to get a little bit warmer in the back of these creeks. But what I mean by a pinch point is, let's say the creek goes all the way back. There's one hard turn, and then it goes straight again. That one hard turn where that water and the current goes around it right there is a pinch point. And you'll look at this, I'm going to show you this video again. You look. You see that's real rocky right there. Just beyond that, it becomes a muddy shoreline. So this is also a staging point for pre-spawn and post-spawn bass. It's a shallow creek just beyond that corner. You look in the distance, you'll see that it turns back to the right. That's a spawning zone. I did not see any fish there. So this key pinch point right here was their spot to stage. Pre-spawn and post-spawn, it's a deep spot. 15 feet off to my left, it's about 60 to 80 foot of water out there. So what you're going to notice is I casted across that point. I didn't cast out on that point. I didn't cast up to the point. I casted it across it. And the reason why I cast it across is as I was coming in looking for shad balls, I was seeing them in consistent 15 to 25 feet deep. So the shad balls were actually a little bit deeper, and I thought, okay, well, with the water level dropping, let's try a bottom bait. So I thought, what I was picturing in my head, I can't be 100% certain where this rocker head bait lands. I throw the rocker head out there, I let it fall to the bottom. I'm guessing I'm around 25 feet. And I'm bringing it up that point. As it starts to come back down that point, I'm doing this yo-yo, feeling it vibrate, letting it fall, almost like a lipless crankbait. The rocker head can do this, and it's a swing head jig. So as it's coming down, I get bit. Now, this is something I noticed later by watching the film. The sun was just beyond me. Okay, it was about 4 o'clock. So the shade side of that point was between the boat and that point. Now, I could have very easily made a mistake here if I wasn't patient. Now, what you're going to notice is when I hooked that fish, he's almost straight down, meaning he was on the shaded side of that point where he was supposed to be, but I was focused on fishing shad style presentation, so I came up a little too tight on that point. Now, where I could have easily made a mistake is if I was making forward progress in the boat. I could have not let my bait even get down into the shaded side of that point. But luckily, I was using my trolling motor just to pitch the boat back left or right or stay back off of that point. If I was making forward progress through there, my bait probably would have never even got down. You'll see one time when I lift, I actually popped the clutch open on my bait caster and let the rocker head fall back down because I worked up that point and then I worked back down that point. If I was progressively moving the boat forward as my bait came over, it would probably just pendulum back and not get down. One of the big clues I got, when you see me yo-yo, I drop it back down, and it's as I go to pick up, that fish has it, which means It was a big largemouth. It wasn't a huge largemouth, but it was a substantial fish, which means he grabbed it when it was most likely on the bottom. Now, this was a crawdad presentation and not a shad. I think if the water was stable or coming up, the largemouth would have been feeding on the shad that the spotted bass were pushing to the bank, but that wasn't the reality. Because the water was dropping in the deeper ledges, the crawdads also have to pull out of their haunts and go down with it, to where I have this theory, as the water's dropping in these deeper California lakes that I'm fishing on, this would probably apply to wherever you fish in the country, as it's dropping down, those crawdads that are shallow also want to get back down into that water, to where I think when water's dropping, a deeper ledge, you know, beyond 10 feet, and this happened to be probably, I think that fish bit it in around 20 on a crawdad presentation, even though shad were very prevalent at the time. So the clue was the shaded side of that point. This was a pinch point. This is a pre-spawn, post-spawn corner right here that just before it turned into a spawn area that was not nearly as featureful with big rocks, big boulders. It became mud. So there's your first couple of clues right there. And I want to know if you guys noticed that. So write in the comments if you noticed that. Now with my gear that I'm using right here, this is critical. I like to go with a little bit lighter line if I'm fishing deeper on a bait caster. This was 12-pound line and it was left on a reel. I switched a reel out at the last minute. This reel probably had 5-year-old line right there, and I'm throwing it on the Sticks hybrid stick. That's the number 3 in the sticksfishing.com lineup. This is a much more moderate fast, and it's a medium power rod. And you would say, well, why am I doing that? I didn't want to be using heavier line. And the longer the cast, the more resistance you have on a thicker diameter line, which means you're not probably going to be making bottom contact as much as you think you would. The rocker head is roughly around 3/8 of an ounce, to where I felt really comfortable with 12-pound having it down there. Now you'll see when I hook that fish and I bring it up, the fish actually starts coming back towards the back of the boat first, and I turn the fish, allowing the fish to hit the surface. When that fish was coming up, I could have taken a knee and forced that fish under a little bit faster. I did an okay job. I should not have let that fish even hit the surface. Then I started to move back to go down to land that fish because I didn't trust the old line. I didn't switch that out. If it was new line, I probably would have boat flipped this fish close to 4 pounds. On that, I feel pretty confident with 12-pound that I can do that. Once the fish came up the second time, I noticed it was choked in the back roof of the mouth, so I felt confident just reaching down there and grabbing that fish at that point. But you will see that the fish actually beats me to go towards the back of the boat, so I should have tried to force that fish down, because I didn't know where that fish was hooked in the beginning. I should have forced him down and ran to the back of the boat to force that fish under the water. A heavier jig style bait like that, when the fish breaks the surface, he can easily shake it off. So I messed up 2 times. The landing not necessarily perfect, but a pretty good landing job. I was aware I shouldn't have let him hit the surface, and also I was a little bit close to the shaded side of that point, and I think it was because I was pre-distracted on that shad by moving progressively down. But luckily my brain sort of hung on to that clue to stay back and do it. So my brain went into cruise control for me, and it made the right decision. All right, guys, so what I wanted you to get from this is knowing that there's a lot of information that went into this, and I probably only utilized maybe 20% of the things I know around this catch, and just noticing boat position was a little bit tight to that spot later. I was pre-distracted. I should have known coming into the back of that creek. I should have been thinking about post-spawn bass or pre-spawn bass on a spot that they would set up. I did look at my chart plotter. I did know that was the back of a dead end, but I wasn't thinking about that clue precisely. So long story short, I got the clue. I could have reran this pattern, though I was working on a different style of video for another company, but I could have reran that pattern. Then if I would have caught more fish and another big fish, there would have been less luck involved because I evaluated what happened. I should have went and looked for more pinch points or pre-spawn / post-spawn staging areas for those fish around the lake if I was trying to catch more big ones like that. If I was working on like my 5 best fish bag for like a tournament, or to see how many big ones I can actually catch that day. But because of that, there was a little bit of luck involved because I slightly screwed up a little bit, but I did get the clues and I was able to evaluate what happened right then. So I could have taken that information with me and went and built upon it around the lake and further dialed it in. I could have stayed farther back, maybe caught an extra fish off that by paying attention to those clues. So remember, even if the first fish is luck, there is a ton of information you can absorb from that and perfect it throughout the day. Last little note right here, I want to tell you something. I was fishing a prototype wake bait by by Headbanger Lures, excuse me. Rockerhead was the bait I caught the fish on. Headbanger Lures is the company, the prototype wake bait that I was fishing. Now, one of the clues that I also mentioned early in this video is as water levels dropping, the fish tend to pull down if it's structure and cover. Well, I actually had that in my head when I started the day with the wake bait, and I went to some floating tires outside of a marina. It's a break wall. And I missed probably a 6-pound spotted bass, which is a monster spotted bass. I don't know if you spotted bass fish, but it's an absolute monster. Hit the wake bait. I jumped on the hook set a little bit too soon. I should have kept reeling, let the fish have a second opportunity to come back. Early in the day, jumped the gun, blew that catch, though we didn't have that one on video for you. But long story short, there was a couple of big followers after that. Later in the day, I caught a bunch on the wake bait, chasing shad balls, but it wasn't the right caliber of spotted bass. I think the big spotted bass moved down with that water dropping and that deeper bait and probably started feeding on crawdads or shad balls down deeper. I could have fished those fish deeper and maybe got a bigger spotted bass, but what I wanted you to get from that is that floating tire moves up and down to where the big fish can just follow that, versus structure and cover on the bank, that water moves down, those fish have to drop out. I'm Nick the Informative Fisherman, guys. Hopefully you like this. If you do, leave me a thumbs up. Write in the comments if there's anything you learned from this, or if you did know and you didn't like this format, tell me that too. I'm happy to hear anything you guys suggest. InformativeFisherman.com and Informative Fisherman at all the popular social media channels. Thanks for watching, guys.